Hello and welcome to our Della Leggings workshop. I absolutely love this pattern and it's a perfect place to begin if you are new to sewing. There's only one pattern piece and you can't go too wrong. The Della Leggings are a classic semi-high waisted legging, and you can either make them in a long version, something a little bit like this length, or you can make one of the two shorter versions, which is really nice in the summer under dresses or if you're cycling. So in order to make this pattern, you are going to need the Della Leggings sewing pattern, which you can either get in the printed version like this, or you can buy the PDF version, print out the A4 pieces of paper at home and then stick them together. In the pattern, you will have two things. First up, you'll have an instruction booklet, which looks something like this, which has all the information that you need. And then you will also have your pattern piece, which is this lovely big piece of paper. Now, in order to make the Della Leggings, you are going to need a sewing machine. It's a common misconception that you absolutely have to have an overlocker in order to make anything with stretch fabrics. It's not true. There's so many things you can make just on your domestic sewing machine. Any modern domestic sewing machine will have certain stitches which are really good for stretch fabric. So you'll have a normal zigzag, you might have a 3-step zigzag, and if it's a slightly fancier machine, you might also have a twin needle option. I'll show you some of the different options that you have a little bit later on when we get sewing. So the things we will need in order to make these leggings are some lovely fabric, and your fabric definitely needs to have stretch to it. And it's best with leggings if you have stretch going in both directions of the fabric, because that allows the fabric to stretch around the leg and also up and down the body. You will also need some nice elastic. I would say elastic that's 3-4 centimeters wide is perfect for this pattern. And then some really good quality sewing thread. This one I'm using is organic cotton, and it's nice and strong. And then if you are using an overlocker, you'll also need some cones of overlocker thread. For this demonstration, I'm gonna jump between both machines so that you get to see how both work, but don't be put off if you don't have an overlocker. The whole thing can be made using just this guy. Once we've got our pattern and our fabric and our elastic, the first thing we need to do is work out which size we're going to make. So the most important measurements for this pattern are your waist, your hips, and your inside leg. In order to measure those, you simply grab a tape measure, wrap it around your waist. Your waist is usually roughly where your belly button is, but you can feel it by just wrapping the tape measure around you, and it will sit comfortably on your waist point, just above your hips. And then your hips is the widest point of your bum, something like that. And make sure the tape measure, it's hard for me to see without a mirror, but make sure your tape measure is sitting parallel to the floor. And then the inside leg measurement goes all the way from your ankle up to your crotch. So you might want a friend to help you measure that, or you can stand on one end of your tape measure like this and then just go all the way up. Once you have those 3 measurements, you are going to find the size chart in this booklet and see which one you're closest to. So we've got the waist and hip in the body measurement chart, so work out which one of those you're closest to. And then if you're taller, so our patterns are drafted to an average height of 5'5" or 164 centimeters tall. If you're taller or shorter than that, you might want to adjust the length of the leg. I'll show you how to do that when we cut out. All right, we know our size. we can cut out our pattern. Let's do it. I'm going to clear a little bit of space. Okay, so let's get some paper scissors. And you can see there's a little key on the pattern, and each number corresponds to a different type of dotted line. So find the size that you want to cut out, work out which dotted line it is. I think I'm going to make a size 12 today. And then you can just get cutting. Okay, here is the one and only pattern piece that we need. Today I'm going to make the full length version of the leggings, but these two lines here are where you would cut to if you wanted to make the shorter versions. So it's up to you to choose. If you are taller or shorter than the pattern is designed for, you can either just add a little bit length onto the bottom if you're taller, and that will be absolutely fine, or take a little bit off the bottom. Or if you want, you can cut down the middle, split it open, or overlap it a bit more. The easiest way though is just adding on a little bit to the bottom or taking a little bit off. So now that we've got our pattern piece all cut out, we can grab some fabric. Today I think I'm going to use this lovely red colour because I haven't made a pair in that colour before. This is our organic cotton stretch jersey, and it has a stretch going in both directions. And it comes in these range of beautiful colours. And I'm just gonna unravel the roll. Give myself a little bit more space. Okay, amazing. Now, I know there will be some people screaming at me that I should iron this, but it's stretch fabric. I'm not going to bother. Can't go too wrong with stretch. So I'm just going to lay my pattern piece flat on the fabric like so. Grab either some weights or some pins or a combination of the two. Pop a couple of those down. I'm going to move that right out of the way so it's not interfering. And just double check I've got enough length at the bottom there. Yeah, we're all good. If you want to be extra secure, pop a couple of pins in. Like so. I'm just going for one in each corner. That should do the trick. And then grab your fabric scissors. This is a new pair that Faf just sent me, so I think they're going to be really nice and sharp. Yes, love that sound. And we're just cutting all the way around the edge of the pattern. You don't need to add any more on because the seam allowance is included in the pattern. So just keep your cutting nice and tight to the edge of the paper. You'll spot there are a couple of notches which you can just cut in like that, just leaving a tiny little snippet in the edge, just so that you know where which is your centre front and which is your centre back later on. Right, let's talk about stretch stitches for a minute. So, most modern domestic machines will have some form of stretch stitch. This one has a normal zigzag stitch, and it has a 3-step zigzag stitch, and it also has a twin needle option, which I'm not going to show today, but I will do a separate video on that at some point. So, I've set it up to a zigzag stitch, and I'm just gonna take some of my scraps. Where's my nice scissors gone? Gonna need those. Gonna need these. And for this test, you want to make sure you have 2 scraps together, because what we're trying to work out is what the best stitch is for stitching 2 pieces of fabric together. So I'm just going to do a little test on my scraps. Always do a nice little back stitch to start. And then my machine was set up to go really slow. I'll just speed it up a little bit. And then a little back stitch to end. Trim your threads and just have a little feel of what that stitch is doing to the fabric. Can the fabric still stretch a nice amount? That's really important. And then when you open it out, can you see the stitching? If you can see the stitching, your tension is probably a little bit too loose or your zigzag is a bit too wide. So that looks pretty good to me because I can't see too much stitching. It's holding the fabric really strong together, but I can still stretch the fabric, which is super important. I'll just show you the 3-step zigzag as well, so that you can see the difference. I'll treat myself to another bit of scrap. And then, so this is our 3-step zigzag, got that all set up. Start and end with a little back stitch. That's looking really nice as well. So you'll probably get slightly more stretch on the 3-step zigzag, and it's a slightly wider stitch in this example. And then when you open it out, again, you're getting a nice good hold there. So if you're on a domestic machine, I'd say have a little experiment, try out some stitches on some scraps, find a stretch stitch that works for you, and then you're ready to start sewing your garment. So we've got these 2 pieces sandwiched together. With jersey, it can be quite hard to tell which is the right side of the fabric and which is the wrong side of the fabric. Basically, whichever side you like better can be the right side of the fabric. I'm not stressed about it. You go either way. There's normally a side that's like slightly more ribbed, which you can see lines in. So I have that as my right side. I like that. And I'm just going to keep those 2 pieces lined up together really nicely like that. And the first thing we're going to do is sew our front crotch and our back crotch. So if you want to use pins, grab a couple of pins and pin this in place. Some people hardly use any pins when they're sewing jersey. They just freestyle, go for it. If it's your first time, I would recommend pop in a couple of pins in there, just so you know it's not going to go all over the place when you start sewing. And I'm going to do both the front crotch and the back crotch at the same time, because why not? Matching up those notches. So there's 1 notch on the front crotch, 2 notches on the back crotch. And now I'm going to sew both of these. And I think I preferred the normal zigzag stitch, so I'm going to stick with that. And my seam allowance on this pattern is 1.5 centimeters. So just going to line that up on my machine. Where's my little magnet? There they are. Little back stitch at the beginning helps keep the thread strong. And then a little back stitch at the end. And that is our first crotch done. We're gonna do the same thing on the other side. We're on a roll, just let it go, let it flow. Alrighty, so that is our 2 crotch seams done. I am gonna jump on the overlocker so that you can see what it looks like in case any of you are interested. Now, if you don't have an overlocker, just leave your seams like that. That is perfectly fine. You could trim down your seam allowance a little bit if you want to, but that's good. I'm happy with that. However, if you have an overlocker and you want to finish the edges of the jersey, you can simply pop those seams that you've just sewn back in the machine, get all set up. I hope this is threaded up right. I did it in a hurry. Yes, looks good. I'm being too lazy to change my thread colours, but actually I think this colour is quite good because you can see it really well on the red. There you go, that is your overlocking. And that's just gonna finish the raw edge of the fabric, make it a little bit stronger, the seam, I guess. There's nothing more annoying than making a pair of leggings and then them splitting in the crotch. So yeah, that just adds a little bit more strength. Awesome. Now you've seen both techniques, depending on which machine you have. Choose your weapon. Alrighty, so we've sewn the crotches. And now we're going to start to see them really come together. So we're going to open them out like this, lay them flat on the table, and can you see we've now got 2 legs. We're going to match the crotch seams up, and I like to fold one seam allowance in one direction and the other one in another direction, and just pop a pin in place. Maybe 2 pins just to hold those seam allowances, really nice. And I'm even gonna treat myself by trimming those threads so they don't get in the way later. And then we're just gonna sew the whole inside leg in one go. It's gonna be beautiful, guys. I'm gonna pop a couple of pins in just to keep me on track, because I know what I'm like. Get carried away and then I lose one side. Maybe 2 pins on each leg, but do more if you want. Now, one more in there. And I'm just going to use the same technique. I'm going to zigzag and then I'm going to overlock. When you get to the crotch, just keep sewing, making sure your seam allowances are going in different directions. You might even want to do an extra back stitch to make it super strong. And then we're going to come all the way down the other leg. All right, that's it zigzagged. And then for extra strength, I'm going to jump on the overlocker and sew that same bit again. Nice. We've basically made a pair of leggings already. You can have a little try on of these if you want. Check you're happy with the fit before we put the elastic on the waistband. And then all that's left to do is hem the bottom. So let's have a little chat about elastic. So inside your little booklet, you will find a finished garment measurement chart. And the top line of that is what's called waist, and then in brackets elastic. And these are a rough guide for you as to how much elastic we think you should cut for your size. They include a 3 centimetre seam allowance, so bear that in mind. And the best thing to do is take a look at your size. So if I'm a 12, I should be cutting roughly 71 centimetres of elastic. But before I cut it, I'm going to wrap it around my waist and just see how that feels. So I'm going to use this nice red elastic, and I'm going to just roughly measure 71 centimetres using the tape measure. So that's about there. I'm going to hold that with my thumb. And then I'm just going to wrap it around my waist and see what I think. So yeah, that feels about right for me. By the time I've taken a seam allowance, I think that's going to be a nice fit. You don't want your leggings to be falling down, but you also don't want it to be really tight and uncomfortable. So just have a little wiggle, see how it feels. And once you're happy, you can cut the elastic. I'm going to go with that. Awesome. Now, let's trim any loose threads that we've got dingly dangling around, because we don't want those getting in the way. And then let's come to our, I'm going to demonstrate this on the overlocker, but it's exactly the same technique on the domestic machine. Again, you just use a zigzag rather than an overlocker. So, and I'm going to find the back of the leggings, and that is the bit that's higher up. So you can see this one's scooping down and this one's pointing up, so that's the back of the leggings. And I'm going to take my elastic, I'll do it over here so you guys can see, and I'm just going to roughly pin it in place, and the elastic is going to be slightly shorter than your top of your leggings. So we're going to want to stretch the elastic out slightly as you sew. And then once I've pinned it round like that, I'm going to find the halfway point and I'm going to match that up with the front of the leggings, where your front seam is. And you'll notice I've got the leggings inside out right now, and I'm putting the elastic on the inside, which is the right side. Cool. So you can put more pins in if you want. I'm going to freestyle it. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to take that top piece off. So I'm going to start by just overlocking the elastic in place. And then once I've got my needles in, I can gently start stretching the elastic as I sew. You don't need to stretch the elastic loads, it's just a little bit. And all the time, just making sure you're catching both the elastic and the leggings underneath. Keeping it really nice and smooth and even. And you want your elastic to overlap by about 3 centimeters at the end. Awesome, trim that thread. Someone taught me this little trick once where if you pull one of the overlocker threads, can you see? It like tightens them and gives you a really nice neat finish, quite like that. And then trim that away. Now, our elastic's on. We could just leave it like that, but we're going to be extra pro. And we're going to flip it down once and then flip it down twice so that the elastic is encased. And then we're going to zigzag that in place. If you've got a cover stitch machine, if you're feeling fancy, you could cover stitch it. But you know, not everyone has a cover stitch machine lying around, so we're going to zigzag it. These overlockers switch between overlock and cover stitch, which is pretty exciting. Alrighty. Job's a good one. Let's sew it. Okay, so we've got our waistband all pinned and ready to go. And we've got our machine set up to a zigzag. I'm going to make this zigzag stitch ever so slightly longer for this, I think. Don't know why, it's just my intuition telling me. And then it's a good idea to check which the back is and start at the back. So the back is always higher than the front, so I'm going to start at the back here near this black pin. And I'm going to pop my foot down. I'm going to do a couple of stitches and then a back stitch. And then once my needle's in, I'm going to gently stretch that elastic so that it's sitting really nice and smooth and flat as I sew. And I'm just going to keep making sure everything's sitting really nice and flat. It's folded over as much as it can be. That's a really wonky pin, don't need that in my life. Take your time on this bit. It's worth spending a little bit extra longer and getting a nice finish. See how the machine goes. We're going over quite a bumpy bit here. One thing I didn't say at the beginning is I did pop a stretch needle in my machine before we started. So if you have one of those, it's worth experimenting with putting those in. It might just give you a slightly nicer finish on the stretch fabric. Okay, we're almost coming back around to where we started. Little top tip, if you trim your threads of where you started before you get to them and before you sew over them, they won't get all bunched up and tangled when you sew over them. Do a little back stitch at the end. And that is a really nice, secure, solid waistband sewn on. All that's left to do is hem the bottom. So, do I want these inside out or the right way around? I want them inside out, so keep them as they are. Just flip the bottom. If you want to have a try on and check the length before you do this, you can do. I'm going to flip the bottom around 1.5, but you could do it more or less. Trimming away these threads that I do not need. And then some machines have this option, which is really good when you're sewing hems of trousers or sleeves, because it means you can slide it on like this. And again, if you have a cover stitch, you can do it on a cover stitch, but I'm just going to zigzag it. Got a bit wonky there. Not to worry, no one's ever going to see it. Trim these little guys. Last bit, going to do the other leg. You can see I'm not even bothering to pin, but you can do if you want to. And it's always a good idea to start on the inside leg seam, because people don't see that as much. Alrighty. Give those a little trim. And then in less than half an hour, I've just made a pair of leggings that will last me for years and years to come. Perfect for doing yoga in, or exercising, or just being comfy around the house. So in the space of half an hour, we've just created a beautiful garment together that you can wear for years and years to come. I hope you loved making them. If you're on Instagram and you want to use the hashtag Della Leggings, it's so nice for us to be able to see your fabric choices and how you style them out. So do give us a tag at Made My Wardrobe and follow us on YouTube, which is the same handle. It's been a joy sewing with you today, and I hope to see you on another workshop soon.